Hi, I'm Jim Gosart. I'm Worldwide Vice President for Republicans Overseas.
Yeah, and I'm John Richardson, and I'm working with Republicans overseas.
John, we haven't talked about tax treaties yet. This is a real important factor of the taxation of Americans living abroad. What are tax treaties, John, and do they prevent the double taxation of Americans living overseas?
Well, I think I'm going to answer your second question first. No, they do not, and in many cases, they facilitate it, actually, they guarantee it. But it does depend on the tax treaty. But let's back up a little bit. So, what are tax treaties? So, tax treaties are agreements between sovereign nations. They are not uh, necessarily an extension of a country's domestic tax laws. What they were designed historically to do, interestingly, was just that, to prevent double taxation. But taxation has changed so much over the last 100 years that although they actually, I want to say they rarely do that, very rarely, okay? And in the case of the United States, we're doing this series in the context of Americans abroad. They actually facilitate double taxation because all U.S. tax treaties have something called a saving clause in them, which effectively says that individual U.S. citizens do not get the benefit of the tax treaty. So what that means is, and the country signs on to this, and remember that practically speaking, citizenship taxation just means that the U.S. taxes people who live in other countries. So a country signs on to a tax treaty. The first thing they do is they agree that the U.S. can tax anybody in the country they want who, is a U.S. citizen without giving them the benefits of the treaty. But in many respects, because people are denied the benefits of the treaty, well, it's just that the treaty does not help Americans abroad, and the savings clause hurts Americans abroad. Um,
So, go ahead.
and if I can just add here a little bit, one of the things that I find so interesting and frankly so appalling in the world of the tax preparer is that these people run around saying the tax treaty prevents double taxation. Well, there may be a few instances where that's true, and I can point to a few, but by and large, that's absolutely not the case. It's the domestic law of the country that provides foreign tax credits and prevents double taxation. But let me tell you something about the standard uh, double taxation clause in U.S. tax treaties. They actually say what they say is that the U.S. will allow credit for foreign taxes paid. Ready for this? In accordance with U.S. law. In other words, there's no independent agreeing. It's just saying, well, maybe we will, maybe we won't. Now, that's a simple part of most tax treaties. Some have more clauses, but my point is one, there's a lot of points. Okay, one, it is absolutely not the treaties that prevent double taxation to the extent that there's preventing double taxation. Two, to the extent that double taxation is prevented, it's prevented because of the domestic law of various countries. But remember, the tax credits don't prevent double taxation. What they do is they provide a way to pay taxes, right? As we've talked about before. Um, three, they're not available to U.S. citizens because of the saving clause. And four, because the treaty benefits, whatever they may be, are not available to U.S. citizens. Are you ready for this? U.S. tax treaties facilitate and guarantee the possibility of double taxation on U.S. citizens living in other countries. How do you like them apples, Jim?
Think of the complexity and the bureaucracy and the infrastructure that goes into all these tax. And where there are tax treaties out there that have been due for renewal and drag on for many, many years, it's not only a burden on Americans living abroad, an incredible burden on Americans living abroad, but it's all this gobbledygook of the bureaucracy that pretends to maintain and in a fair way, keep these treaties current and relevant. And John, it really is yet again another example of why the only solution here is to end it all, go to repeal citizenship-based taxation and sever citizenship from tax residency. And that's where we stand, as we've said many, many times. That's where we stand as Republicans overseas. And we have completed and submitted a position paper that calls for exactly that.
Absolutely, Jim. I mean, this is, beyond I mean, the problem is the taxation is now really about life planning and how people live their lives. These tax codes of they're not they may include raising of revenue, but they're about so many other things, right? So, this US citizenship taxation, it's not really about taxation because, as in the United States, many Americans don't pay federal taxes. They don't owe them under the law. Same thing, for Americans abroad. But make no mistake, these tax codes regulate people's lives, making this very much a moral issue. And Republicans overseas is on absolutely the right side of the issue, not only from a tax perspective, from a moral perspective. And other individuals and groups should join up, okay, in this mission to end this terrible unfairness and injustice of the U.S. claiming the residents of other countries subject to these U.S. rules. That's what it really is, right?
Couldn't agree more, John. Very well put. Well, thanks, John, for all of this and for all of your contribution. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in and watching us.
Thank you, Jim.